Okay, so yeah, today we're going to talk mostly about syncing operations. The synchronization between tool posts and between spindles is something that I believe PartMaker really shines in far and above other CAM softwares out there. So I want to go through that. Before we dive deep into that, though, if there's anybody who's watching that hasn't seen PartMaker, I'd like to just go over a few things about the interface and talk about kind of what you see here real fast. That way you're not totally confused. Um, PartMaker uses these two different windows. We can bring in a solid model here below. You can program any toolpaths on the solid model if you'd like, but most PartMaker users typically just use the solid model so that we can get 2D geometry, and then we program most of our toolpaths that way. So I'm going to hide every toolpath except the one, whatever one's selected. You can see if I click on a new operation, it'll show just that one. So using the 2D interface really makes things just simpler. And for simple-minded people like me, it's just a little cleaner and works better with my brain. Now, on the left side, you'll see we have our tree. And there's a lot of operations on this part, which is why we chose this part for this demonstration. But you'll see it's not necessarily organized in the order we're going to machine things. Like you have the cutoff programmed right here, and then you have all these other operations. The reason for that is PartMaker organizes everything based on what we call a machining function. So in this case, we have our main spindle turning operations are under this machining function. So I'm going to program every main spindle turning operation in that machining function, and then I would move on to another one. So this would be our sub-turning, okay? And then maybe we'd move on to cross-milling. This would be cross-milling at 90 degrees. So any operation that can be programmed at 90, we're gonna just program them. And once we're done using all of our machining functions, getting all of our tool paths down, then we're gonna reorganize them later in what we call the process table. And that's where we will do our synchronizing. Okay, so let's go into our process table. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to run through the general idea of how we're programming this. So let me actually enable all the processes. So we're basically going to do the tip of the part on the main spindle while the sub spindle is also running the ID. Okay, and then once all that's complete, we're going to grab with the sub somewhere around here. And then the sub spindle is going to support while we do all the rest of the machining operations. Okay. Now it's also worth noting that we're programming this on a Star SV machine. So it has a gang, it has a turret, it has back working, obviously has a main and a sub spindle. And so those are, three different tool posts we have to synchronize in two different spindles that we have to synchronize. And PartMaker is going to make it extremely simple. Okay, so let's go into our process table. Now, in this process table, like I said before, this is where we would end up reorganizing all of our tool paths. And my computer is running just a hair slow. Okay, there we go. So like if for some reason I wanted this K drill to be above 7/16 drill, I could do that. It warned me that it's a little out of sequence for operations, but this is where you can drag and drop all of your machining operations to go in order of how you're actually going to machine it on the floor. So all of these are already organized the way that we would want it. For the sake of this demonstration, it just seemed simpler to do that. There's 65 operations. So we're going to synchronize 65 operations fairly quickly. So let's start at the top, and I'm going to open up our time chart. So this time chart will allow us to see main spindle operations in this row, sub spindle operations down here. We can also see that yellow operations are for the gang, blue operations are for the turret, and green operations are going to be for back working. Okay. So in PartMaker, all of the synchronizing is done over here on the right-hand side. You can see these little icons here. And then we also see this mode. It's in this case, it says M1SO. That's just a default mode for how the toolpath came in. That will change once we start going through that. But this is where we do all of our synchronizing. So if I open up our first operation, you can see our operation was programmed for the main spindle. So it defaulted to a main spindle operation, machining with one tool, and our sub spindle is doing nothing. Now, if I want our main spindle to run at the same time as our sub spindle, I just have to check a box to tell PartMaker we're machining with one tool on the sub as well. And then you'll see that the picture changes, gives you a little bit of a representation of what's going on. And I can do this individually on every single icon if I want, or to save time, I have this button where I can modify modes for all consecutive processes with the same mode. Basically, what that means is all these M1 SOs, they're all going to get changed until we get to a new mode, which will be M0 S1. So I'm going to say, okay, and it changed all of those. Now, nothing down here in the time chart has changed because we haven't completed the synchronization yet. Now we need to tell PartMaker that the sub spindle operations also have a main spindle running at the same time. So let me click on our first sub spindle operation right here. And since it was programmed for the sub spindle, PartMaker defaulted it to machining with one tool on the sub, and now the main spindle is idle. Well, we need to check the box for main machining with one tool on the main. You can see the picture changed. Say okay. And I forgot to check this box down here, so I do have to do that again. Okay, nothing has still changed down here in the time chart, excuse me. I just have to hit this synchronize button, and now we can see everything moved. You can see where the sub spindle operations finish. They're going to finish about in the middle of process 6. And then just for a visual, we also see this vertical line here. That's going to represent a weight code. And then you can see this horizontal line across here. That's also going to represent a weight code. Now, other CAM softwares, you have to be dragging and dropping the weight codes and sync codes between operations. Some of them you have to physically type in the weight code you want during an operation. So you would have, some sort of section in here where you would type in what weight code you need. But what if it's a brand new machine that you just got? You don't know what the weight codes are supposed to look like, or maybe you're new to multi-channel machines altogether. You really don't know what the weight and sync codes are supposed to look like. That would just be daunting for anybody to have to learn, and then to have to enter all that stuff correctly in PartMaker. As you can see, PartMaker is doing all of that just with a couple check boxes and looking at a picture. So it makes it so simple. So let's go down to our next set of operations. This one is going to be a pinch turn. So we're going to pinch turn the front of that part. Now, PartMaker did default this to machining with two tools. It knew we were pinch turning, and I'll show you how it knew that here in 1 second. But it defaulted that for the main spindle. On the sub spindle, we're not going to be doing any work right now with the sub. So I'm just going to say, okay, those are already set. And let me exit out of this real fast so I can show you how PartMaker knew that was a pinch turning operation. If I double click on first turn, we have a roughing, we have a finishing up, but then we checked a box for pinch turning. So it changed the modes for us. Now, if I would have forgotten to check that box, I could always just set the modes as we intend. That's just kind of a shortcut. So I could have come in here. If this was machining with one tool, all I would have to do is check that. But that was just a little bit of a shortcut that PartMaker has. We can see down here in the time chart that the gang is running at the same time as the turret. So let's move on. Now these operations are going to be, we don't need to change them. We're going to be machining with one tool on the main. Nothing's happening on the sub. We're not supporting quite yet. So I'll just leave those as is. Now, when we get to the second set of pinch turning, in this case, I want to also be grabbing onto the part with the sub. So we're going to add some follow support. And I already have this value in here. We're just going to grab a 1/2 inch onto the part. Now, if you do have extended nose collet, you don't have to do the math in this box for the extended nose collet. The post will handle that. All you do is you tell PartMaker we're grabbing a 1/2 inch onto the part, and another setting for your extended nose collet will be applied to that. So I would want to say modify modes for all consecutive processes. All it's going to do is change the very next one. So I'll say okay, and those have changed. I'm going to synchronize. Now, you have these sync groups here on the right. PartMaker does know if you've created kind of an error. And so like, let's say in this case, I'm going to do this wrong. I'm going to say idle, and then I'm going to hit synchronize, and it says missing a main spindle primary process in sync group 4. Do you want to continue? Yes, that's a soft error. I could post as it is. All the code would be wrong. It would let me post, but it's telling me that this should be also supporting. Since the first one was supporting, the second one also needs to be supporting. So then when I synchronize again, you'll see that this group 4, 3 and 4 will change to just group 3. And now there's no errors. Okay. For all the other operations, I want to continue to support with the sub spindle. So we will still be using just the main spindle to machine with one tool. But you'll see all those operations, they need to be synced. So I'll just click on the first one. Machining with one tool on the main is correct, and we want to follow support at the same distance, just the 1/2 inch. We'll just stick with that. And I'm going to say modify modes for all consecutive processes. And now you can see all of these have changed all the way down. So everything is synced. The only change I would make is on the cutoff. Let me exit out of here real quick. On the cutoff, I would want to move up somewhere around here. So we need to change the value. I'll just do something like 7.8. That'll keep us 80 thousandths away from the edge. That'll be nice and rigid. So on our cutoff operation, all we need to do is say we're going to go to 7.8 instead. And once this happens, the post is going to know it's going to have to unclamp, unsync everything, move the sub spindle up to the new position, then reclamp, resync everything, and continue with the cutoff code. So again, that's a pretty complex block of code, and all we're doing is changing this value, and all we have done is check a couple boxes. So say okay, synchronize. Now everything we have is synced. We're ready to post some code. So I'm just gonna generate some code real quick. And now you can see this is a 3-channel machine. So it's fairly complex. PartMaker is really nice. It has this align button. So we can line up all of the code with the weight codes. So if I hit that, it breaks up the code, makes it really easy to read. So I'm going to kind of go down through this. We'll read through the program. But really all I'm trying to stress is that there are a lot of weight codes, a lot of sync codes, because we're bouncing between different tool posts and different spindles. And all of this would be extremely hard to do in some of the other CAM platforms out there, but PartMaker has made it really simple. So let's just start by going down. We're going to be working with one tool on the main spindle. So this would be the gang actually, and this is turret. So this is channel 3 actually, even though it's in the second slot. But everything on channel 1 is gang tools. Everything on channel 3 is turret tools. And then our sub spindle is over here. So you can see we're bouncing between gang and turret while the sub spindle is also running on the back working. All that code's being read at the exact same time. We get done with the sub spindle operations. We're going to eject the part while the main spindle is still running. And then we get down to our first pinch turn. So we're going to position the gang. We're going to call up the turret tool. We're going to position the turret tool. And then this star has mirror mode. And so we're just going to be making the cuts on this side, and the turret is going to be following all of these moves right here. So we'll finish the pinch turn. We're going to cancel the mirror mode, and then we're going to move on to just machining with one tool right now. So we'll come on down, and then now we've gotten to the second pinch turn, and this is where we initially start supporting our part. So again, we're going to align the gang, or we're going to call up the gang. We're going to call up the turret. Now we're also going to bring in the sub spindle to position. We're going to be syncing spindle speeds. That's what this M82 does. The M40 provides tracing between Z1 and Z2. So we're going to sync the Z1, Z2, position the turret, and then we're going to be doing our cutting. So a lot of codes, if you didn't know what these were, to have to enter these onto each operation or drag and drop would have just been kind of a pain. So now we're supporting with the sub while we're pinch turning. Pinch turn finishes up around here. And we're going to stay supported while we do all the rest of our work. We're going to be bouncing between the gang over here. Now we're using the turret. The sub is still supported. Now we're going back to the gang. So you guys kind of get the idea. I'm just going to scroll down to the cutoff because that's really where the rest of the majority of the weight codes are. But you can see a lot of weight codes to go back and forth between those tool posts. Okay, let's see. Okay, cutoff. So what we're going to do is we have to reposition to 7.8. So PartMaker knows that it has to open the sub. We're going to position our cutoff tool on the gang, and then we're going to move the sub spindle to the correct location. Before that, it had disabled some of the syncing, or it kept the syncing on the spindle speed because this is now a turning operation, but it disabled the syncing between the Z1 and Z2. That way the Z2 can move independently. So it's going to get to position. And of course, it's going to sync Z1, Z2 again. Going to do the cutoff, and the program is going to be over. So, like I said, tons and tons of sync codes and weight codes. PartMaker is going to handle all of that just with a few clicks of some checkboxes, and you're just looking at some pictures. Now, I also wanted to kind of demonstrate the speed of this because I've just been explaining all of this as instructions, but once you get used to PartMaker, I wanted to demonstrate how quickly you can sync these operations. So I'm going to go to, there it is. So this is defaulted. Everything are, all the modes are just the standard default that they come in with. They haven't been synced whatsoever. You can see the time chart. Well, okay, yeah. So the time chart still shows everything's defaulted. And then I am going to do all this with the stopwatch. So you can just see, I'm not going to really rush either. I'm going to go through this, but you can see how quickly it is to sync all these tool posts and spindles. So I would start the main operation. I wanted this to be machining with one tool on the main and one tool on the sub. I'm going to modify modes for all the consecutive processes. And then, of course, I got to do the same thing with the sub spindle. So this came in with just one tool on the sub. I want it to be machining with one tool on the main as well. I'll modify modes for all consecutive processes. So let's synchronize. I like to hit this button because it'll give me an error if I've done anything wrong. So these ones are good. I just need to get to this one where we're going to add some follow support. We're going to do that at a 1/2 inch. Sync both of those. I hit synchronize again. Again, I didn't get an error, so I know I've done something right. Then we're going to get into this. Also add follow support. Machining with one tool on the main is okay. We're good with that. And then I'm going to have all of those change. When we get to the bottom, I know I need to change this value. So we did 7.8 inches. Say okay. I hit the synchronize button again. And we've synced 65 operations in 1 minute and 11 seconds. Pretty quick.